Hello there. I'm Jason from the Hellenic Roof podcast. So, the reason we are here, I guess, is that you had a few interesting subjects that you wrote to me that you can really elaborate on. And I think we should jump into them. So, you told me about mysticism, shamanism, whatever, and healing. So, start with how you got involved into all that. Who are you? And then we can, start talking about anything.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because the more I look back, the more I realize I think like a lot of healers and shamanic spiritual path workers realize that they were just always on this path and they were always doing this. And, I remember a specific moment when I was in my mid 20s, let's say, and I was saying to a couple of my closest friends, we were having tea, and I said, it's really weird, like more and more people are coming to me for, they are trusting me and they want spiritual help and guidance and like, I guess I'm going to try to help them with it. And I was like, I'm just so shocked. And they both looked at me like, why would you be shocked? Like, of course, that's what you're doing. That's what you've always been doing. And, it's like, it's very funny. I had a friend who came out to me one time and, she's like, I'm gay. And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, we all knew that, like, and I felt like it was very similar. Like other people can see in you often what you take a long time to see in yourself and admit to yourself. So I think I was just always kind of on this path, and I always had that sort of eye towards an awareness of what other people were experiencing. And a lot of people call that being an empath, right? Being empathic. And I also always just had this level of, I guess, approachability and trust that people have in me. And, I think that's partially because I have that energy going back out, right? Where I'm a genuine, honest, vulnerable, open person. So, that helps a lot. But even when I was very young, I would just kind of communicate with the universe, trees and rocks and animals and things. And I just had no idea I was even doing that. I would just sort of ask questions in my mind, and information would just sort of come back to me, and it always felt very loving. And I just knew that the world was full of an animated intelligence, whatever you want to call it. Now I've come to call it soul or spirit or source, or some people call it God, or some people call it the ether, right? And that was everywhere. And I think when we're young, we all kind of know that. We're all kind of a little bit more tapped into that. But I was very tapped into that, and I just was always very aware of people's emotions, their states of mind, what they were doing, why they were doing it. And, I didn't really understand for a while that I was psychic, maybe not to the degree that some people are. I haven't honed it like some people have, but I have this other perception too. And again, I think everyone does. I just think it was my natural sort of state to lean more deeply into that and sort of follow it. I started having many paranormal experiences when I was a teenager, right after, and during puberty, which happens to a lot of people as well, especially when they're, sort of in this depth. And then I started experiencing contact from whatever people might want to call guides. I call them guides and allies. And I just found myself constantly, not constantly, but throughout my life in different phases, working with shamans, which I didn't seek or choose. They just would happen to me. Like we would just meet and we would just find that we, had work to do together, and we would connect, and they would teach me what they taught me and perform healings on me. And that would just happen. It happened when I was in other countries traveling randomly. Shamans would just be like, you come. Like, come on. And we would just, connect in the most synchronistic sort of ways that were unplanned. And so my life and my soul just picked this path for me, and I've just been following it my whole life. So yeah, I mean, that's how it all kind of came about. We can go into more detail about any of those things if you want to, but that's the long and short of it. And now I just offer this, directly to people if they want some healing, if they want to work one-on-one together, if they want to learn some skills, if they want to, practice their own spirituality in more depth and detail. Like, this is just what I do now.
Awesome. Great story. So I guess you are, from what I'm hearing, you are a little bit more intuitive than most people. It seems to me that you are able to tap into different energies around, and also it seems to me that I think you refer to yourself as not exactly open, but vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of talk about vulnerability in these days, the past decade, to be honest. And there are some people saying that we have to be more vulnerable. Some people say that that's more feminine energy, which is a strength in a way. But others say that if you are a man, it might not be in handy sometimes. So let's start from that. So for one man or woman to be a good healer, in your personal opinion and experience, do you have to be very vulnerable and very open, or is it achievable with other ways too? So what's your opinion on that?
Well, I think we'll put it this way. If you're going to heal something within yourself, you have to be vulnerable to do it. So you can't access the deepest parts of yourself and the deepest wounds without vulnerability. If you try to access them from another energy, you're just going to build up more scar tissue and, junk around them instead. So vulnerability is key to healing yourself, right? And let's say someone was going to come to me to receive healing. Well, they're not going to do that without vulnerability. It's vulnerable to even ask me, right? And it's vulnerable to trust me to do it. It's vulnerable to connect with me and perform actual healings and ceremonies and blessings and these things. Like those are all vulnerable states, and I think what's also true, and this was very true for me, was I also had to learn incredible boundaries that are iron, more than iron, titanium, right? That nothing can get past, that an intense strength that is almost the opposite of vulnerability, right? And so that's the masculine side of this. And all of us have the feminine and the masculine within us. There's not anyone who doesn't. And I'm not saying we're all androgynous or that we're all, whatever the words are for, I can't remember right now, for, some of these things that people are putting on now as their identities. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that within you, everybody has a vulnerability, a feminine ability to receive and accept and sit with the quietness, and everybody has the ability to act with the strength and the power and go out and move things around and get things done. And you really can't be whole or healed without both. Right? Like I said, you can't access the wound even without vulnerability. You can't get in there to the depth of whatever it is. This is true of our physical wounds too, right? Like sometimes a surgeon has to cut you open. Like that's the most vulnerable physical presence that you can have, is allowing someone to cut into you, right? So it's very similar to that. But the surgeon's also cutting, doing, sewing, like that's a masculine more energy, right? And when I'm in the midst of healing, I've put up very powerful protections around myself and the person I'm working with. And that's very masculine as well. So I really think you need both to do any good healing work on yourself or others.
More or less, I agree. Yeah, my experience is pretty much the same. Even though I don't have your healing abilities or skills or experience, but I've
you
seen
might be
that,
surprised.
yeah, maybe, yeah. Who knows? But the fact is that I'm very interested in healing for, probably 3 decades. When I was young, when I was like 5, I said to my mom that I want to be a doctor. So that was my perception of healer back in the day. And I was very good in biology, for example. So I was very keen to the human body, and I hate to see people suffering. So I guess might be an inkling of, probably I want to heal people. I don't know if I'm good at that, but I'm good psychologist, people say, like you. So it reminds me of myself when he talked about people, open up to you. And it's kind of the same to me, to be honest, sometimes. But I think what you say about masculine and feminine energy is very important, the balance. And I believe from what I know, from what I see, from what I feel around me and people around me, that people sometimes they overreact to feminine and masculine as part of being a man or being a woman. And one sad thing that also there is that people associate feminine with weakness, which for me is a stupid idea, because both a woman and a man are strong individual. I don't know how you can say this, humans. Probably a man and a woman, usually they have a little bit different strengths, but to say that the feminine is weak and the masculine is a strong thing, this is completely idiotic to me. To be balanced with them, to express a balance of them, yeah, that's I think the proper way to go. And having said all that, what's your experience with shamanism, and where have you been with all that, and what do you know? Do you do anything about that? So let us know.
Yeah, I think shamanism is a word that people are very attached to. And so a lot of people don't want anyone who looks like me to use that word. But I've been trained primarily by shamans. And so I could call myself a shaman. The work I do is shamanistic. There's no difference between what I do and what they do. But I don't have a specific tradition. There's not just one specific tradition that someone has sort of like Christed me with, like, now you are this, right? So I've been around the world and I've learned from all sorts of traditions and people, and I've had teachers from, the East in Hindu sorts of cultures and Buddhist sorts of teachers. I've had Taoist teachers, and I've had mostly shamanic teachers. But like I said, I've had shamanic teachers from Ecuador who call themselves Taitas. I've had shamanic teachers from the Americas, right? Native American teachers as well, from various tribes and cultures. And so they're not just one thing, right? But when I look at all of these spiritual teachers and healers and leaders, I see the exact same thing happening. There's slightly different traditions, there's slightly different ways, but it's the same in each case, in which you are going into some sort of state where you're accessing the other side, whatever you want to call that, right? The astral or the Akashic or whatever, the soul space is what I call it. And then you're bringing back information and healing. And sometimes you're grabbing parts of people that were left in other lifetimes, or, it's like there's time travel going on. Like there's all kinds of things, but all of it is that same action of you're going into this other sort of space and you're coming back to this space with some of the information and healing and whatnot. And so, so the word shamanic does describe what I do. But if I call myself a shaman, people get upset sometimes. So sometimes I just say, oh, I'm a mystic healer, right? If you want to call me a shaman, you can. If you want to call me a healer, you can. If you want to call me a mystic, you can. I'm a teacher too. I've been a teacher by profession, and I still teach via my show, Rogue Ways and Middle Path, and via my one-on-one work that I do with some people who are also developing their own spiritual skills and healing and that sort of thing. So all of those things are what shamans do as well. So I don't know. I don't tend to call myself a shaman for those reasons, but there's nothing different between what I do and what shamans do. Again, I didn't even go seeking this, and at no point did I seek any of it. Like it literally came to me every time out of the blue, unexpected, where I would meet a shamanic teacher, especially, and they would invite me to come, heal with them and learn with them. And each time I just would, and it was always random, and it wasn't like I went to like a spiritual fair and a shaman program. I'd be just like walking down the street and a shaman would be like, you, literally, and we would then connect. And so that's also, part of how I knew to trust myself, because one of the biggest blockages to anybody who is going down this path is trusting yourself and the path, that this is actually real and that you are actually doing it. And so that helped me actually a lot. If I would have gone seeking it, I'm a very logical person, actually. I'm exceptionally rational. And so I would have convinced myself like, well, I went seeking that and I went and grabbed that. And I'm just trying to convince myself I'm doing these things. And I think my soul knew that. So it was like, all right, we've got to just like throw her into it like randomly, and then she'll learn to trust this and open up a little bit more. Because otherwise I would have spent my whole life in doubt. And doubt is, you are not going to accomplish anything if you're in doubt. If you believe you cannot do it, you are not going to do it, right? So it was really helpful to get over that doubt and over rational self, perhaps, and really sink into that mystical side of life that is everywhere all of the time, period.
Excellent. Yes. The rationality of people sometimes gets the best of them. So it's like an obstacle sometimes, even though you can use rationality and logic, which comes from logos, which comes from truth, or at least, approaching truth. That's great.
Yes.
Logic is very helpful, can be really useful in our civilizations and building things. Geometry, all of that stuff, engineering, and even creating tools and all that stuff. And that's great.
Yes.
At the same time, though, it seems to me, from my own experience and from what you say, seems to be the case too for you, that people in our world have a lot of weird stereotypes, and it's hard to get over them and explore. I think exploration, Lindsey, is something that our modern society and we as people, we are inept. It's like we have this ability inside us because we are humans, and humans are explorers by design, in my opinion. But it seems to me like everything is handled to us in a silver plate, and we are fed all these news and all these scientific data, and everything goes into rationality. And at the end of the day, though, if you go and search studies, go and search observations, even the so-called science, the so-called cold hard true facts, they are not what we think they are. Even them seems to me that they are mystical. Sometimes they are observational. Sometimes they are psychological. In our world, from my opinion, there isn't something that's 100% rational or 100% mystical. I think there's a mix, there's a balance, there's something that between those two that work in harmony when you let them work in harmony. So what do you have to say about all that, Lindsey?
Yeah. I think that's exactly like we were talking about with the feminine and the masculine, right? There's a balance for a reason. And they both have qualities that you need, actually, if you're going to continue in any way. And this is true of physical biology. It's true of the astral space. It's true in everywhere we can look, actually. You need a masculine energy and a feminine energy. It's true in electronics. It's true in, like, you could apply this to anything because it is a fundamental aspect of reality. Right, that there is the feminine and there's the masculine, and you have to have both. Neither is better, neither is worse. They're both powerful. In fact, I have a friend who says, you know, the masculine and the man is immovable, and the feminine, the woman, is unstoppable. They're both powerful, right? They're just, and together, you could not even top that, right? There's nothing you could stop. It's just going to create and accomplish what it wants. So I think that's really beautiful. And so when you're talking about the rational and the logical and the mystical and the sort of more intuitive, that's the same, right? It's feminine and masculine. And you need both. And if you go too far into just rational, just logic, and just facts, you miss so much, actually. And science, we see, does even better when they start to allow for the qualitative data and the little, maybe like a little looser on the rational, and open up a little bit. And, you know, when they go studying these things, and I know it gets old to hear about quantum physics. Quantum physics is, you know, our explanation for everything magical and mystical and woo-woo now. But it's true, you know, when they go deep down into those areas, they start saying very little is rational, actually. Very little is predictable. And you do kind of have to use your intuition to really understand some things. And even this is what I love too. Almost every, you know, amazing engineer, scientist, inventor, great mind that we can think of, we look back and we read what they actually say about how they come to their inventions and how they come to their realizations. And they're almost always in these mystical sorts of places, right? They say, oh, I dreamed it, actually. I dreamed this, and then I woke up and I started searching and realizing that this is actually real, right? Or this presence came, I felt really warm, and I just saw the schematics. They just laid out before me, and then I just went to work, like drawing them and making them happen. We hear this from Einstein. We hear this from Tesla. I think we hear this from every really great thinker. They say the same thing. So even the most rational, the most sort of sciencey people, they're saying like, yeah, I had a mystical experience, and that's actually half of what's going on here, at least. So I love that there's actually always this balance. It's really weird in our modern society that people have just been led to and encouraged to abandon the intuitive, the emotional, and the spiritual, and just stick to the only logical, only material, you know, only factual. And it's sad. I think this is why a lot of people are actually pretty desperate for a connection to their own heart and soul, and to the heart and soul of the universe right now, because we're way too far the other direction. The pendulum has to come back at some point.
I'm into that. True. Couldn't agree more. Interesting. I see, Lindsey, I see, by the way, people going back to religion slowly. So they want to find the spiritual fulfillment through religion. And I'm not against, I'm not pro. You know, everyone has his own or her own discernment, and you have to really, you know, find what works best for you and to follow that. So having said that, though, yeah, tell me more about what's your opinion about religions whether that's Christianity in many forms. There is Catholicism, there is Orthodoxy, there is Gnostic Christianity. There are many forms. And what do you know about the Muslim world and the Muslim spiritual aspects? And what do you know about Judaism or Buddhism? So what's your opinion about all these things? And do you think that they offer some solution to the people?
Yeah, I do. I think they've been misused by powerful people against the regular people and intentionally to sort of trap people in certain mindsets or fear or subservience, especially. So they can be a trap, right, for anybody. And they can also be a trap if you want to get into them and then you just stick with that one thing and you say, this is the only thing. Everything else outside of this thing, right? I'm Jewish and everything outside of Judaism is evil and it's crap, right? Or I'm Hindu and everything outside of Hinduism is evil and it's crap. Like that would be a mistake in my opinion. However, while you're doing that, you're still gaining something, right? And especially in that, I've never read a holy text. You know, I've read pieces and or the complete and total of every religion I could find as I was seeking and growing, and I was just fascinated. I just wanted to know more. And all of them, I've never found one yet that doesn't have pure gold in it, that doesn't have like, this is actually the essence of the human spirit, this is the essence of the human experience, this is how we connect to spirit, this is what we actually are, this is what we're here for. All of those are embedded into each of these, and so you can find gold, you can go into any of them and you can have fantastic experiences, you can understand very deep spiritual truths, and they're true, they're real, they are right? And then you start, what's really fun for me is when you go beyond that and you start doing like what I did and peeking into all of them, right? And seeing the similarities between all of them. And this is, people call it syncretism. When you look at all, there is value in all of them. They are all actually saying very much the same thing. And you can start to see patterns and you can start to see what's more important and less important. You can start to see really this more universal view. And I really mean universal. It's not just universal. You look at all of them and you see them all. You see how they describe the whole universe and every aspect of it. And there is nothing that is not described within them, especially when they're taken as a whole, as a total, right? And you start to see patterns like this repeats over and over again in every single religion. This must be really, really important. All humans just have sort of come to know this and put it in their texts and, uphold it to this great degree. This must be really important to us, right? There's a reason why. And you start to see things like that. So I think it can be destructive and it can be a trap, but you can also use it to free yourself. And this is beautiful. So I don't, a lot of people want to say like, we can't have religion anymore, or we need a new religion or something, or we need to stop people from joining religions. We need to break them out of it. And I'm not saying don't do that. You should do whatever you want, but you just have to acknowledge like you at some point were a part of something that you no longer ascribe to, whether it's religion or something else, right? We all do that. We're like, here's this thing, I really like it, it's totally what I believe, and then 5 years later you're like, yeah, no, I don't really think that anymore. I'm not really into that anymore. But it gave you something, and you have that with you still. It added to your experience, it added to your knowledge, it added to your wisdom. And this is true of people who are in any religion anywhere in the world. And for a long time in my country especially, it was very difficult for many people to look at Islam, especially with anything but fear and hatred, because we had this horrible thing that happened in New York City, and we just decided in one day we knew for sure who did it, and then we got really upset and angry, I guess. And it was interesting when I went and I was living in Turkey, I just wanted to know more about Islam, and I'm there, I'm hearing, the call to prayer 5 times a day, and it's gorgeous and beautiful. And there's all these ancient, beautiful mosques. And so I got to learn more about it, and same as ever. There's nothing that's not beautiful within this, right? Okay, there might be pieces where you're like, yeah, it's a little scary. There's some like murder and something, whatever. But of the actual spiritual components and, ideals, there's beauty, right? We've learned about jihad in this country. If you talk about jihad, people instantly have this image of like war and terror and this a horrible fear comes up. But then jihad, I learned, is actually meant to be internal. It's primarily meant to be internal. You're supposed to look within yourself and say, where is the evil in me? Where is the darkness in me? What's another way of saying this? Where's the shadow in me? Where's the parts that I haven't yet healed? and I'm going to heal that. That's my jihad. That's my holy war. Right. And I'm like, that is beautiful. Anyone can use that as a healing tool in this beautiful way. You say to yourself, yeah, I wish I didn't drink so much. Like, I just drink a little too much sometimes. Like, that's my shadow. I need to heal that. I need to figure out why I do that. I need to bring that further into balance or quit it altogether. That's my jihad right now. Right. And then you succeed and you are spiritually triumphant in yourself. You have won a holy war. Your being is brighter. You've brought more light in, and you've achieved a higher balance. Well, now you get to do another jihad. And I'm like, this concept, if we could share that around the world, like this would transform so many people's lives. This idea that you are your own spiritual vessel, there's light and dark within you, and you're allowed to wage a holy war on the parts of yourself that you would like to transform. I think it's really beautiful. And there's just no religion that exists that I can think of that doesn't have some gems and some beauty in it that you could learn from.
Right. That was a thoughtful answer.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, it's in the world of oversimplification, it's great to hear answers that are exploring the gray between the white and the black. So I more or less I agree with you to that also. As long as you have a connection with nature and the religion does not cut your connection with nature or with logic or with human feelings. So as long as the religion is an addition to your life and maybe a guide to a spiritual guide, but does not subtract from your life happiness, joy, and communion with nature, as long as the religion respects all that, I mean, yeah, I'm pro every religion that is pro-human, pro-health, to be honest, pro-truth. As long as the religion helps you, go through the mystical questions that we have, every one of us, and then, I'm willing to explore. And you said very wisely that sometimes we get into things, and 5 years later, we are out of these things. We get out of these things, but if we look them as lessons, it was worth the while. Maybe it doesn't seem like that. Maybe many people think it's a waste of time. But if you get the lessons from that, I mean, it was worth it, no?
Yeah, well, and in my experience, you couldn't have avoided it, right? Something in your soul or in your mind or in your heart or in your body called you to that for some reason. It vibed with you. Yeah, you felt it. You were drawn to it, whatever you want to call that, right? You had this connection to it and you had to actually experience that for some reason. And it brought something out of balance in you into better balance. And what I love what you said, right? That as long as this religion doesn't sever your connection to nature, that's prime. That's prime. That's like primary. As long as it doesn't sever your connection to yourself. And really, you can make sure that it doesn't. You can make sure that nothing in the world could ever lead you astray by having a strong connection to yourself. I end every one of my shows with travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. And I mean that, like always look inside first. You can see something, it can seem so good, you can be attracted to it, you can go up to it, you check your heart and your gut, you'll know if that thing is right for you, right? Or let's say you've chosen this religion, it seems really cool to you, you go to church every Sunday, Saturday, whatever, you're in mass and your pastor says something and you have this gut reaction like, no, that's not true. Well, trust yourself. Don't trust your preacher. Don't trust your pastor. Don't trust me. Don't trust anybody. I mean, trust everybody. But, when it comes to those moments, you have to look inside first and you have to find what is true within yourself. And, the things that you take and gather and bring with you as you're going through life of like, this is what I hold true. And this is what I hold important and valuable. These things resonate with you and the truth inside of you for a reason. You have to trust that more than you trust some random outside authority. This keeps you safe from government. It keeps you safe from media. It keeps you safe from religious zealots and like any kind of imbalance you can think of to have this internal knowing. And, again, the reason our connection to nature is so primary is that's where this is clearest. You can go out into nature and you really connect and sit and you're a little bit quiet and reflective. And this is where you can really check with yourself most easily is in that sort of space because you are nature. And you have to have that. That is your connection, right? And so when you nourish that and give it some time and space, it's going to help you a lot.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And So tell us more about what you're doing since we are ending slowly. Tell us of where can people find you, of course. Do you have any products, services? Do you do online? Tell us everything you can do for people. And
Yes.
for you.
I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I do my show. It's Rogue Ways and Middle Path, and that's Sundays and Tuesdays is Rogue Ways, and Thursdays is Middle Path. It's at 7 p.m. Mountain live. If anybody wants to tune in live, there's also, the recording goes up on the podcast, and you can also just listen whenever. And my site is rogueways.org, and I always point out it's Rogue Ways like pathways, not rogue waves like ocean waves. So rogueways.org. And on the site, there's lots of stuff. I write, articles and poetry and reflection, and that's sort of the blog, which is the main page. But then I also have lots of services I do. I've written 5 books that you can get on the site from me. I love to inscribe them and mail them out to people. You can also get them on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or anywhere else. There's some fiction in there. My newest one is actually my favorite. It's a channeled little sort of short, reflective and spiritual and emotional and uplifting, sometimes little blips, and you can it acts like an oracle. Actually, you can hold the book, ask a question, or have a problem in mind, or just whatever's on your mind, and then open it to whatever page, and there's your response from the universe. And I've received the coolest stories from people on this. It's not like, it's very direct. The answer is very direct to what there is. It couldn't be another question it was answering. So I love hearing those stories. And that book is called All Endings Are Beginnings. And so it's a short little book, but it's full of wisdom and beauty. And so there's that. I also do orgone pendants and plaques and little candle holders that are really beautiful. They are orgone energy accumulators. So if anyone doesn't know, orgone is that same universal energy that we were talking about, right? You can call it whatever you want. You can call it ether, you can call it God, you can call it prana, you can call it chi. It's all the same thing. And these are just little, blessed and enhanced, energetically high vibing things. You can wear the pendants anywhere you go, which is nice. And then I do offer services. I teach one-on-one through guidance sessions. I also do ceremonial healings if you feel like you've got a deeper, sort of bigger issue or darkness, or just you want to do some house cleaning. Sometimes, like we said, those can involve some past life trauma release. It can involve some soul retrieval. And so those are very powerful for people. And then I also do blessings, sound healings, and tarot readings for people, as well as so much more. There's just a lot on the site people can explore. I do meditations that I guide twice a week. They're live for people who can make it live, or they're also recorded for people who can't. They're guided, they're channeled in the moment from source. I never know what's going to happen, and so they're each unique and different. And I also finally have a 6-week course I do with people who want to really commit to uplifting themselves and becoming, their own sort of healers or energy workers or whatnot. And it can be any type. We don't have one modality. It's for all types. The goal of the class is for you to open your spiritual channels more, clear them out more, and get more in touch with your own skills and abilities, because everybody has them. And so if you feel called to that, that would be great. It's called Brighter You. It's a 6-week course. So that's a lot. That's enough. If people want to come connect, that's a lot of different ways they can do it. So rogueways.org is the hub for all of that, or you can just find Rogue Ways if you search.
Great.
Oh, and I'll add, since you asked, those services are all via, I use Zoom. So you can be anywhere in the world and we can connect.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's the miracle that we were talking about offline. So, all right, Lindsey. So people go find Lindsey to where Lindsey say you can find her. And Lindsey, stay please for a moment after the recording. And for anybody else listening, I thank you for watching. Thank you for lending us your attention and your time and your energy. And I hope you got something from this interview. I really got something from this interview. And I'm going to be more intuitive in the next few weeks, to be honest. It was a nice reminder from Lindsey. Thank you, Lindsey, that you remind me that, to balance this thing out and it was just in time. I really needed that, so I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it so much. I'm so glad to hear that, and I hope everybody else got something out of it too. Thank you for having me.
Great. For anybody else, see you in the next episode. Ciao, ciao, everybody.